public safety issue. It's really a public health crisis. We have people dying. We have people dying every day throughout across this country as a result of heroin and opioid abuse in our country. In 2013, over 8,000 people died nationally from heroin overdoses. That was a 39% increase from 2012. And what's important to know about that is what the numbers are showing us, and we'll have some more data to share with you in a moment. We have not yet hit the peak of the problem. We're still going up, and it hasn't flattened out, and we haven't started to come back down to the other side. And we will start to come back down to the other side. We haven't gotten there yet, and heroin has risen up in this country in the early 1900s and in the 1970s, and now it's back. And eventually it will go back down. So we can sit around and wait for it to go back down, or we can, as a community, do something about it and address the issues right here in Harrison County and the region more quickly. Because if we don't act quickly, more people are going to get sick, and more people are going to become addicted, and more people are going to die. And so I think it's imperative upon all of us to act now and not wait for somebody else to solve the problems for us. Heroin use by year in America, this comes from the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration. You can see that we are trending upward. There was a spike in 2006, 2007, it went down, and now we're going up. Little hard to see, but what that tells us is that in 2012 in America, we had over 600,000 people who reported using heroin. That number from 2013, I believe, is in the mid-700,000s, people that actually reported using heroin. That's a staggering number to know that in this country we have 750,000 or so people who are admitted heroin users. Heroin seized at the U.S.-Mexico border in 2014. This data just came out. Nearly 5,000 pounds of heroin was seized at the U.S.-Mexico border by United States law enforcement agents, DEA, Homeland Security, and other law enforcement agencies. That's what we got. That's actually what we took into law enforcement custody before it hit the streets of Clarksburg and Bridgeport and every other neighborhood in America. Think about what we didn't get. Think about what actually made it to the streets. So that gives you an idea as to the type of volume that we're seeing coming out of Mexico. And it's a multi-billion-dollar industry. You wonder, why are we seeing so much heroin? Well, there's a lot of money to be made. It's simple economics, Economics 101, which I wasn't very good at in college, but there's a demand and there's a large supply, there's money to be made, and so the traffickers, the cartel leaders are very savvy, and that's something that I think is hard for a lot of people to grasp, but you're thinking about the jungles of South America where some of this comes, you're thinking about Mexico, and you're not thinking that these guys are like Fortune 500 CEOs, the ones that are at the top of these organizations. They're very smart and savvy, and they know where they can make money, and one of the places they can make money is in Appalachia. They know they can do well in Kentucky and West Virginia and Tennessee, and so they send the product here. Drug seizures at the U.S.-Mexico border over the past 5 years. Again, this data just became available to us. You can see heroin going down slightly and starting to trend back upward last year. This is in kilograms, and so the stat I showed you earlier was in pounds, and so just over 2,000 kilograms of heroin was seized at the border last year. Right next to it is methamphetamine. We're not going to spend a lot of time talking about meth tonight, but I think it's important to show you this chart because we're talking about drugs in general. Meth is something that I don't think we've seen the worst of yet. We've seen a lot of meth in West Virginia, in north central West Virginia, in Upshur County, in Randolph County, in Harrison County. I see a lot of it in Kanawha County. But look at how much it's gone up, and look at last year, 15,000 keys of meth was seized at the U.S.-Mexico border. They're producing it in factory-like settings in Mexico. They're producing it at high volumes, and so they're not concerned that they lost 15,000 keys. they continue to produce it and send it up here, and they're making money with that as well. A couple of alarming things have happened recently in this area. A couple of large seizures have occurred by law enforcement, and just over the holidays, just before the new year, there was a traffic stop by the West Virginia State Police over in Hardee County, and over 4 pounds of crystal meth was seized. And that may not sound like a lot to you, but in law enforcement, if we seize a couple of ounces, that's a big deal if we're talking about methamphetamine. But we found 4 pounds in the car of a foreign national. That's a scary sign. That tells us that we're seeing large quantities of crystal meth making it up this way. And so we have to keep our eyes on that. Cocaine has gone down. This chart is consistent with everything that I've read in that the production of cocaine has gone down. It hasn't gone away. You'll still read in the paper that we're prosecuting people for possession and delivery of cocaine and crack cocaine, but it's gone down. And marijuana's gone down as well. The reason that's important is that the drug cartels have realized that there's not as much money to be made with marijuana. It's become legal in 30 states or so for recreational use or for medicinal use or both. And so it's not hard to get anymore, not as hard as it used to be anyhow in a lot of states in this country. And so they've switched over to something that's more profitable, and that is heroin. Let's talk a little bit about West Virginia, and this is why we're all here really, is that West Virginia leads the country in drug overdose deaths on a per capita basis. We've all seen the studies. We know that the numbers are scary. And I think in West Virginia, we have not yet reached a plateau where we've started to come back down. I think when we see the studies come out for here in 2015 for data from the past couple of years, I think you're going to see that we're still either at the top of these lists or very near the top. Here's a question for you, and we were just in touch, Tara Tai from my office and I were just in touch with the folks in Charleston at the Bureau of Health Statistics to get some real-time, accurate data for all of you tonight. What do you think was the increase in heroin? This is just heroin overdose deaths in West Virginia between 2012 and 2013. 12%, 57%, or 134%? 134% between 2012 and 2013. So that increase in heroin deaths is staggering and shows that we're still rising. Here are the counties, again, based upon data from the Bureau of Health Statistics, the counties that lead the state in overdose deaths, heroin overdose deaths, between 2012 and 2014. Number 1, Cabell County. Number 2, Berkeley County here in the Northern District in the Eastern Panhandle. Then Kanawha, then Mon County, and then Harrison County. Those are the top 5. The demographics show that about 3/4 of those dying are male and 1/4 female, and the most impacted age range is between 25 and 34, although we're seeing people younger than that and older than that who are dying from heroin overdoses. Where's it come from? Well, most of the heroin that we see here in this part of the country is coming through Mexico. Now, it may not be produced in Mexico. A lot of it gets produced in South America and goes through Mexico and up to the United States. The cartels in Mexico coordinate with cartels in Colombia, and the heroin ends up making its way to the United States because that's where the money is. There's a lot of heroin as well coming from Asia to the United States. These are the source cities for heroin coming to north central West Virginia. We've got Chicago, Detroit, Cleveland and Columbus, Pittsburgh, Philadelphia, Baltimore, and Washington, D.C. Not that we don't see heroin from other parts, but those are the main cities where we see heroin coming to north central West Virginia. And in particular, Columbus and Pittsburgh, probably more than any of those other cities. A tremendous amount of heroin comes from Baltimore into the Eastern Panhandle. Baltimore is known by many as the heroin capital of the United States. There are, by some reports, 40,000 heroin users in the city of Baltimore. And we have people driving every day from West Virginia to Baltimore to pick up heroin and bring it back to northern West Virginia. We also recently had a major indictment from the U.S. Attorney's Office involving a pipeline of heroin and prescription pills coming from Philadelphia to Morgantown. What is heroin? Well, as many of you probably know, it comes from the poppy plant. Many of you may not know this, and when I heard this at a presentation not too long ago, it surprised me, but as late as 1912, the Bayer Corporation, which makes the aspirin that you find in your medicine cabinet, was selling heroin for coughs and colds for adults and for children. It was known as the sedative for coughs, which is scary, and it was exported from to 23 different countries by the Bayer Corporation. Here are actual stamp bags that were seized by a drug task force here in the Northern District. And I say stamp bag because that's how our drug task forces see a lot of the heroin packaged, in bags just like this. And it's, when I say stamp, it's roughly the size of a stamp, and it's stamped with some type of a logo. So you can see from this NYPD, you can see Sweetness or something close to that, Blue Thunder. And the reason why it's marked like that is in part because users like a particular cut of heroin, and they can go back to their dealer and say, I really like that NYPD, can I get some more of that? And so it begins to get somewhat of a reputation for quality, and users feel like they know what they're getting when they buy a bag that's stamped in a particular way. It can be inhaled, it can be smoked, it can be injected. My understanding is that the most intense high, the best high from heroin is when it is injected and goes straight into your bloodstream and gives you the most immediate, most intense high that you can receive from this drug. Why is it so addictive? And I said I wasn't good at economics in college. I wasn't very good at science either. So what I can tell you is this, and our panelists will know more. When it gets into the brain, it binds to the molecules in our brain known as the opioid receptors. And that increases the production of dopamine. And dopamine controls our sense of pleasure and motivation. And so if somebody compliments you and says they like the outfit you're wearing, that might give you some pleasure. If you eat a big bowl of chocolate ice cream, that might give you some pleasure. Well, heroin does that times 1,000, and the brain never forgets the feeling that it received once you put heroin into your body. And that's why it's so hard for people who are addicted to heroin to not use again, to recover. The brain doesn't forget. The brain reward is tremendous with this particular substance. What's it do to you? It gives you that initial rush of euphoria. It decreases your heart rate. It slows your breathing. Gives you some drowsiness. It decreases your pain perception. If it decreases your heart rate too much, you have an overdose, and you can possibly pass away. That's the danger of this. How pure is the heroin sold on the street? That's one of the biggest dangers with this drug, is that the users never know exactly how pure the heroin is that they have just purchased from a dealer. We have seen, and we're able to send heroin that we seize to the DEA laboratory, and we receive purity levels. And we see everything from heroin that's 10% pure to as much as 90% pure. Not too long ago in the Northern District of West Virginia, there was heroin on the street that had the nickname, or it was being referred to by users as fire. It was 90% pure according to the laboratory results we got back from the DEA. And we had a number of overdose deaths as a result of that substance being out on the street. And as crazy as this sounds, the users were actively seeking it out. They had heard that it was particularly powerful, and they wanted that. They wanted to see how that might make them feel. And if you think about tolerance, you might develop tolerance to any number of things. Well, the same thing occurs here with heroin. A user may become accustomed to using heroin that's 10 or 15% pure, and then when all of a sudden they use something that's at an 80 or 90% level, their body's not accustomed to that, and that can lead potentially to an overdose or an overdose death. Heroin gets cut or mixed with a lot of different things. It could be sugar, it could be starch, it could be powdered milk. Dealers obviously want to make as much money as possible, so they might acquire a kilogram of heroin but they don't sell it in its purest form. They mix it with other things, and then they can sell more and they can make more money. And so they mix it with these other substances. But they also mix it with other drugs. And sometimes that drug that they mix it with is fentanyl, which is a powerful pain-killing drug that cancer patients will sometimes use. And so here are headlines from across the country last year of bad batches of heroin getting mixed with fentanyl, and people dying as a result. Because again, the users don't know exactly what they're getting. There's no testing that they do before they put it into their body. They're trusting to a certain extent that the dealer is going to give them something that is safe so that they'll come back as a customer. In Western PA, almost a year to this day, we were just all getting over the shock of this. We had 22 people who died over about a 10-day period in the Pittsburgh area from a bad batch of heroin that had been mixed with fentanyl. And you can see the range of ages, mostly males, ranging in age from 25 up to 50, and these stamp bags were stamped with the term Theraflu and Bud Ice, also Magic City and CVS. These are all people that passed away from using this same bad batch of heroin. Let me talk briefly about the connection to